Dear class 9 students, I'm here to start a new chapter, that is chapter number 8, 5 Kingdom Classification. Okay, uh, there are millions and millions of living creatures existing on the earth. Okay, so right from unicellular organisms to gigantic multicellular organisms. Okay, and they are all interdependent. Okay, which means they are related to each other, they are interrelated, they are interconnected. Okay, which means they are very much important for us also. That means our existence, our very existence is also you know dependent on each one of them, directly or indirectly. Okay, that's why it is very important to know each one of them as well. Okay, so there are many organisms maybe facing a very precarious condition for their existence. All right, so many of them may be endangered. Okay, many of them may be on the verge of extinction. That's why if one of the species is suppose extinct or is vanished, it will badly affect the environment. It will badly affect our environment. It will badly affect our life as well. That's why it is very important to know about them. Okay, and but it is very difficult to know about each one of them by one by one, because there are millions. There are millions. That's why the idea of classification is very important. So this idea of classification was first was first put forward by Linus. Okay, Linus. Okay, who was born in 1707. Okay, and died in 1778. Okay, who was born in 1707 and died in 1778. So he was the first person to bring forward the idea of classification with two kingdom classification system. Okay, two kingdom classification system. That means that time he brought about the idea about two kingdom classification system, where we find the Plantae and Animalia as the kingdoms given suggested by him. Okay, but that idea given by him was not that much acceptable, because that brought about a lot of contradictions. So that now we find the five kingdom classifications, okay, that we talk about, means we talk about it afterwards. So first we have to understand some of the words related to it here. Okay, so there are species and all those things there, as I've told you that. So why classification? So classification is to know about the different kinds of organisms living on the earth, because all those organisms, whether they are too small or too big, they are all interconnected. So their survival is very important for our survival as well. That's why we need to understand them, and to know about them we have to classify them. We have to classify them considering some of the common sharing properties they have. Okay, so that's why it is very important to know, or have the idea about this classification. So before going into this classification, first word that you have to understand is species. Okay, what is species? So species is a kind of organism. Okay, species is a kind of organism whose members can interbreed. Okay, whose members can interbreed. For example, this is the keyword to define it: interbreed. All right, for example, human beings, Homo sapiens. Okay, human beings, Homo sapiens, the scientific name of human being, Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens are human beings, irrespective of their caste, irrespective of their color, irrespective of their countries, can interbreed, whether a man or a woman, you know, from India, or man from Brazil or any part of the world, can normally reproduce, or can normally produce their children. Okay, they can normally interbreed. That's why they are a particular species. So here, to define species is a kind of organism whose members can interbreed. That is species. So Homo sapien, human beings, okay, is a kind of species. So similarly, you see a cow, you see a duck. So these are the different species. Okay, so here some crosses between two closely related species. I've told you the word called interbreed. Okay, and interbreeding is possible only when the species, the members of the same species are there into that certain or into that particular process. Okay, that is possible. Okay, only when they are the members of the same species. I've told you just now, a human being, whether he or she from any part of the world, they can do that. Okay, but there are no, some interventions. There are some, cases where you can see the crosses between two closely related different species, not the same species. I mean, the different species crosses can also be made when two different, species are there by the intervention of human beings. It's not that necessarily they do it, but by the interventions of human beings. That means scientists now what they have done is that they have crossed two different species, but the two different species are closely related species. So these two different species are also, or can also be crossed to produce the new organism. Here there are many examples. Here you see, for example, here donkey, male donkey, was crossed with the female horse by human being to produce a kind of organism called mule, which bears the properties of both donkey and horse. But that mule is neither a horse nor a donkey. Okay, so it is an organism, but it is not a species. Remember, this is not a species. This is only an organism. Why is not a species? Because this mule cannot interbreed, cannot reproduce now. It is a sterile. The word used out here is called sterile. Okay, sterile. This mule is just an organism, not a species, because it is a sterile, which does not have the property to produce the new one. So sterile. So this is not the cross out here done on their own unnaturally, but this was done by the humans intervention. So human beings have made it possible to produce the organism, but not a species. Remember, similarly, zebra and donkey. Okay, when these two were crossed, a new sterile organism was produced, whose name was given as Jenki. Okay, zebra and donkey produces Jenki, which is also a sterile organism, not a species. Similarly, they crossed even tiger and lion to produce Tigon, not tiger, Tigon, which is neither a tiger nor a lion. Similarly, goat and sheep were also crossed to produce a sterile organism called gib. Okay, similarly, even in the case of plant, okay, even in the field of plants, they crossed potato and tomato to produce tomato. Okay, so this is all possible when the human beings intervened by some scientific method, by applying some technology. This is possible, but for this case also, the organisms or these two species should be closely related. Okay, so this is how we begin, okay, to understand all about this, your five kingdom classification system. Okay, so I've told you here in the five kingdom classification system, before going into this, I've told you Linus was the first person to bring forward the idea of two kingdom classification system, when it was only Plantae and Animalia. Okay, what? Plantae and Animalia. But that Plantae and Animalia, that means these two, this idea given by Linus was very much contradictory, because that brought about a lot of confusion in the modern time. That's why this has been replaced by the new idea of five kingdom classification system. Okay, according to the old classification system, that is two kingdom classification system suggested by Linus, uh, we find all the living organisms, all those millions and millions of living organisms existing on the earth, being divided or being classified into these two kingdoms only. Okay, they are Plantae, including all the plants, and Animalia, including all the animals. Okay, so these two kingdoms were there to classify all those, or to group all these millions and millions of living organisms existing on the earth. But this system brought about lot of contradictions. Okay, this system has lot of drawbacks. So among those drawbacks, here we'll discuss some of the drawbacks given there in the book as well. Okay, so number one, we have bacteria. So bacteria, according to this system, okay, were put under Plantae. But this bacteria, unlike the members of Plantae, or unlike the plants, this bacteria are prokaryotic. Prokaryotic means organisms having no well-defined nucleus. Okay, having no well-defined nucleus. So nucleus, suppose this is a cell. This is a cell. Here is a nucleus. Okay, so this nucleus is surrounded by a nuclear membrane. Nuclear membrane. Okay, nuclear membrane. Nuclear membrane. Okay, but this prokaryotic cell does not have a nuclear membrane. Okay, to enclose the nuclear material there is no nuclear membrane, which is called undefined. Okay, undefined or not well developed nucleus. So that kind of organisms the bacteria are. Okay, in the meantime, bacteria have flagella to locomote, to exhibit the movement. Bacteria have the flagella. So these characteristics of bacteria cannot suit them to be under Plantae. That is one of the contradictions. Okay, similarly, we find some single-celled organisms. Okay, some single-celled organisms like Euglena, okay, performing the characteristics of plants as well as the characteristics of animals, both. Okay, all right. For example, Euglena have chloroplast like the plants, because plants have chloroplast. Chloroplast or chlorophyll. So some of these single-celled organisms like Euglena also have chloroplast like of those plants. But in the meantime, they have the cell mouth also to feed like those of animals. That means here in such case we find both the characteristics of plants and animals. So where to put? Where to put here? Because there are only two kingdoms. Under which kingdom can we put this one? That also brought about some confusion there. Similarly, fungi. Okay, fungi. So according to this system, fungi were put under Plantae. So, but unlike the other members of Plantae, this fungi, okay, this fungi neither have the chloroplast or can produce their own food, nor they have root, leaves or stem. Okay, so these are some of the examples of the drawbacks of this two kingdom classification system suggested by Linus. Okay, so as I've already told you, now since this two kingdom classification system has a lot of drawbacks, is now replaced by the recent five kingdom classification system. So these five kingdoms are as follows. Number one, Monera. Okay. And number two, Protista. Okay, which is also called Protoctista. Okay. Then number three, Pongi. Number four, Plante. And fifth one is your Animalia. Okay, so these are the five kingdoms according to the recent five kingdom classification system. First one is Monera, Protista, which is also called Protoctista, Fungi, Plante, and Animalia. Okay, so they all those organisms which are put under these different kingdoms have different properties. Okay, now let us discuss one by one. So first let's talk about Monera. So what kind of organisms come under Monera? Let us see those. So the main properties of those organisms coming under Monera have these properties, that is prokaryotic and unicellular, or I can just write here. Okay, I can just write here. They are unicellular and prokaryotic. Okay, let's see. All those organisms, all those unicellular organisms which are prokaryotic, come under this Monera. So very primitive type. Okay, example, you see bacteria. Okay, bacteria. So bacteria are the members of Monera. Why? Because they are unicellular and prokaryotic. They are made up of one cell, as well as their nucleus is not well defined. Okay, their nucleus is not well defined. Okay, so their nuclear material, especially DNA, is just dispersed there in the cell. It's not enclosed within the nucleus. Okay, so they are unicellular as well as they are prokaryotic because they do not have a well-defined nucleus. So these are the organisms like bacteria that come under Monera. Okay, similarly, the other one here, Protista. What kind of organisms that come under Protista? See here, they are unicellular. They're unicellular, but unlike this, they are eukaryotic. Okay, so those organisms which are unicellular itself, but they are eukaryotic. Eukaryotic means they have got a prominent nucleus. They have got a well-defined nucleus. So these are the organisms which have these properties, unicellular and eukaryotic, you find coming under Protista. Okay, for example, you see autotrophic, autotrophic unicellular organism. Okay, autotrophic unicellular organism means which can produce their own food. Singular unicellular autotrophic organism that come under this Protista are many there, but example is your Chlamydomonas. Chlamydomonas. All right. Chlamydomonas, whereas unicellular heterotrophic uh, organism that come under protista are, amoeba, okay, amoeba, okay, paramecium, okay, paramecium, so etc. are the ones that come under protista. Okay, Monera, unicellular and prokaryotic, example bacteria, whereas protista or protistista, include those organisms which are unicellular as well as eukaryotic, having a well-defined nucleus. Example, Chlamydomonas, unicellular autotrophic organism. Chlamydomonas that belongs to protista kingdom. Similarly, there are unicellular heterotrophic organisms such as amoeba and paramecium, which all belong to protista. Okay, so similarly we find the different characteristics with fungi, plantae and animalia also, but this the characteristics of these three kingdoms will be discussed in the next session. Okay, so today we'll do only this much. Thank you very much.